Divorce. That word used to terrify me. It still does, in some ways, but back then, it was like a phantom lurking in the corner. Every time we made love, I'd push it deeper into the darkness, trying to forget it existed. You see, there was a night, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when Emily and I were sprawled across the bed in our old apartment in downtown Chicago. She pressed her bare back against my chest, every inch of her skin alive with sweat and warmth. I remember the lamplight caught the arch of her spine in a soft glow, and she turned her face toward me with this playful smile that made my heart lurch in my chest. My hand slid down her stomach, tracing little circles, and she let out this quiet moan I can still hear when I close my eyes. It's that memory I hold on to, or try to, anyway. We were different people then. There was no talk of drifting apart, no silent dinners, no nights spent in separate rooms, letting the cold space between us grow. But that's how I want to begin, because everything that follows is born. A hush that felt loaded with tension, like someone had snuffed out a candle just seconds before I arrived. I flicked the switch. Nothing unusual at first glance, just the faint smell of perfume, the kind that wasn't hers. My head started to pound, a dull ache that traveled down my neck, settling into my shoulders. Physical pain, real pain, as though I'd just been in a fistfight. Except no one touched me. I stood still, listening, the blood surging in my ears. Then I heard faint rustling in our bedroom. Door. Darkness. Another space. The hallway seemed longer than usual, like it was stretching out on purpose. My heart drummed so loud I thought it would burst. I remember thinking, if I see something I can't unsee, what then? I tried to prepare myself, but it didn't help. When I finally stepped through the doorway, Emily was on the bed, and she wasn't alone. I caught the barest glimpse before they scrambled apart. His broad shoulders, the cut of his jaw, and her hand still grasping at his arm. She jerked around, hair disheveled, eyes wide in shock. I saw terror flash in her face, but it was too late. That image, her face twisted in guilty surprise while the man tried to cover himself, burned into my mind. It was a betrayal so visceral, I felt like someone had taken a bat to my gut. Emily screamed something. I can't remember the exact words, but it was a mixture of, "Oh my God," and "It's not what it looks like." Or maybe she was just making noises, wailing in panic. Meanwhile, Mark, yeah, that's his name, Mark Henson, scrambled to find his clothes, muttering curses under his breath. He tried to slip by me, but I blocked his path instinctively. I was shaking from head to toe. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles popped. Time slowed down. I saw a flash of adrenaline in Mark's eyes as he braced for a fight. But instead, I stepped aside. Just like that. A wave of cold emptiness washed over me, and I let him pass. He was gone in seconds, leaving behind the lingering odor of sweat and shock, and Emily's perfume that he must have drenched himself in. She was half covered by a sheet, breathing hard, cheeks wet with tears or sweat, or maybe both. We locked eyes for what felt like forever, but I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a door. I just turned around and walked out. I felt the physical pain creep into my chest, settle behind my sternum, and ripple through my limbs like an electric current. My legs wobbled as I found my way to the kitchen. I gripped the edge of the counter, hunched over, trying to breathe. Emily's voice trailed after me, shrill and desperate. "John, please, John, talk to me." But I stayed silent. That was the first time I discovered the affair. I wish I could tell you it was the last. But life's not so clean. Over the following weeks, I did anything I could to avoid confrontation. I started leaving the apartment at random hours, no real destination in mind. I'd walk the city streets or sit in the car for hours, engine off, staring at the flickering neon signs across the street from our building. Emily and I became strangers coexisting under the same roof, crossing paths like ghosts, barely acknowledging each other. When we did speak, it was tense and clipped. She'd stand there, arms crossed, face set in this rigid mask. Other times, she'd be on the verge of tears, but her voice was defiant. "You're never here. You don't care what I do anymore." I wanted to scream back, to accuse her, demand an explanation. But trust, once a shield, now a weapon, kept slicing through my insides every time I tried to speak. Instead, I found it more punishing to give her nothing. Silence. Let her wonder what was going on in my head. Let her fear how deep my anger ran. Divorce hovered on my lips, but I couldn't utter it yet. Some part of me still clung to the old memory of her skin against mine. That night of laughter and tangled sheets. A foolish part, maybe, but it was there. Door. Darkness. Another space. One morning, weeks after that discovery, I overheard Emily on the phone. The bedroom door was cracked open, and her voice was low, anxious. "Mark, I told you, not here. He's unpredictable." She paused. I said, "I don't know what's going on in his head. Just be careful, okay?" I stood there, letting her words sink in, feeling my heart race. Unpredictable. She had no idea how predictable I felt, how utterly cornered I was. In that moment, I realized something had changed inside me, something essential. A piece of me had splintered off, leaving behind a hollow, vibrating tension. I didn't barge in. I let her finish, listened for the click of her phone. Then I stepped into the room. She whipped around, startled. We locked eyes. I took a breath. "Who were you talking to?" She tensed. "A friend from work." It was such a bad lie, so transparent. I almost laughed. But all I managed was a derisive snort. My body ached, an actual, tangible ache in my ribs and shoulders. The pain flared whenever I was near her, as if my anger was physically scalding me. She opened her mouth to speak, but I walked away. Her voice followed me. "You can't keep shutting me out like this." Then louder, "John, say something." I said nothing. They say a person can only live in limbo for so long. Eventually, you either sink or swim. For me, the moment came when I discovered Emily had been meeting Mark at her office building's security desk. She'd bring him coffee during her lunch break. Chat. Laugh. The rumor spread among the staff. People talk. A friend of mine, who worked in the same building, gave me a heads up. I confronted her that night. I remember how still the living room felt. The only light came from a single lamp beside the couch, casting long shadows on the walls. Emily stood by the window, arms folded protectively across her torso. I walked in, closed the door quietly behind me, and leaned against it. She studied my face, searching for a clue. Then her voice cracked with some mixture of fear and anger. "Are you going to say anything?" I stared at her, that same dull ache raging in my chest. "I know about Mark. The coffee, the lunches." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "So what? We talk." "That's not." She let out a shaky sigh. "It's complicated, John. If you just listen." I cut her off, not with words, but with action. I took 2 long strides, grabbed her face in my hands, and kissed her, hard, like I used to when we were first married. For a second, her body responded, out of pure reflex. Then she shoved me away. Anger flared in her eyes, followed by a short, barking laugh that sounded more like scorn than humor. "Oh, that's how it is now," she snapped, breathing heavily. "You think you can just take what you want." I felt my jaw tighten. She misread the gesture. She thought I wanted her, maybe. But it wasn't desire that drove me. It was the memory of how we used to be, a twisted attempt to reclaim something. "You used to." I started, then stopped. My voice sounded too raw, like the words were tearing my throat on the way out. She scoffed. "I used to a lot of things, John. Maybe you should have paid attention before it was too late." Her laughter was hollow, each note like a slap to my face. I realized then I was shaking, not from fear, but from a scorching blend of fury and sorrow. Trust, the weapon. It sliced deep. I found I had no words left, so I let the silence speak for me. Door. Darkness. Another space. After that night, I left. Not forever, just to clear my head. I'd come back late, slump on the couch, let the hours pass in a blur. Emily barely tried to stop me. It was as though she'd accepted my detachment, maybe even welcomed it. And each time I stepped inside our home, that same physical pain spread through my body, intensifying with every awkward glance or cold exchange. Days stretched into weeks, and the tension grew thick enough to taste. We spoke only when necessary. Bills, groceries, some trivial detail about a phone message. Sometimes, in the early morning, I'd watch her from the doorway of our bedroom. She lay curled up, arms around a pillow, her expression vacant. I wondered if she thought of Mark, if she dreamed about him. Then I found out about the DNA test. Or, more precisely, I found the envelope. A small plain envelope in the mail, with a lab's return address. A single piece of paper inside. When I read it, my hands started trembling. I wasn't the father. We tried for children in the early years, but it never happened. I'd even wondered if there was some hidden reason. Now I knew. She'd gotten tested behind my back, and apparently Mark was involved. My vision blurred with anger. I wanted to tear that paper into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to burn the entire damn building to the ground. Instead, I just folded it neatly and put it back where I found it. That evening, I confronted her in the kitchen. She was chopping vegetables with mechanical precision, eyes down, lips pressed thin. I stood across from her, letting the hum of the refrigerator fill the silence. "You got a DNA test," I said, each word drenched in simmering rage. She froze, the knife in midair. Slowly, she turned to face me. "Yes," she said, voice shaky. I had to know. Know what? My heart pounded. If? What? She swallowed hard. "If you weren't able to." She stopped herself, as though the rest of the sentence was too cruel to say out loud. I waited, my fists clenched at my sides, nails biting into my palms. "It confirmed what I suspected," she continued. "We're not. You're not." Her voice trailed off. I stared at her, my entire chest throbbing. "So Mark is the father." She closed her eyes. "John, I can't keep doing this. We need to talk, to figure out something." A flash of memory, the two of us, naked on that bed all those years ago, laughing about silly things. Now here we were. My body felt heavier than stone. "I'm not going to stop you," I said quietly. The words came out cold. She flinched. "What does that mean?" she asked, anger creeping into her tone. "You're not going to fight for us. For me. Trust." A sword lodged in my gut. "I have fought," I whispered, "and you never noticed." She slammed the knife onto the cutting board. "Say something real, John. Yell, scream, do anything other than stare at me like a damned corpse." I felt my lips curl into a faint, bitter smile. "No." That single word struck her like a slap. She blinked rapidly, struggling to contain her rage. "Fine," she hissed. "Then go. Leave. Get out." Door. Darkness. Another space. I left that night. For good, I think. But before I did, I wrote her a letter. A short one, a few sentences scrawled on a piece of paper. I don't even remember the exact wording, but it was something like, "This is your silence, your mistake. You won't see me beg." Then I tucked it under her pillow, like a final note in the pages of a closed book. I remember the physical pain in my shoulders and back as I packed a small duffel bag. Every movement felt weighted by a heartbreak I'd never known before. My mind drifted to the times she joked about my stoicism, how she found it mysterious or sexy. Now she cursed it, wanting me to yell, to fight, to prove that I cared. But I refused. My silence was my final act of vengeance. There's a twisted satisfaction in giving someone exactly what they fear. Emily expected me to crumble, to grovel, to plead. Instead, I offered her emptiness, no closure, no parting tears, not even a door slammed in anger. I left with the hush of a ghost. I moved in temporarily with an old friend. Let's call him Danny. He had a spare room in his apartment a few blocks away. I told him bits and pieces of the story, but not everything. My world was spinning too fast, and I felt too raw to delve into the details. Every time I tried to explain, a physical ache spread through my chest, and my voice threatened to crack. In the nights that followed, I wandered the city streets, letting the cold wind sting my face. I replayed the affair in my mind. Emily's body entwined with Mark's, their laughter at the security desk, the hush in our home. Each image felt like a shard of glass pressed into my skin. And yet, beneath all the anger and disgust, a strange determination grew. He destroyed me. She destroyed me. But that destruction was forging something else inside me, like steel hammered in a fire. I was discovering a grim kind of strength. One evening, I heard from a mutual friend that Emily had broken down at her office, sobbing uncontrollably in the restroom. Another day, I got a cryptic text from her. We need to finalize some things. Please meet me. I ignored it. That was part of my plan. C. Denying her the chance to lash out or make peace. The quiet was suffocating her now, reversing the roles. A few days later, I ran into Mark by accident. I left Danny's place early, heading to a coffee shop around the corner. I was rummaging for my wallet at the counter when I felt someone step in line behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and recognized him. Mark. He looked different in civilian clothes, jeans, a fitted black t-shirt that showed off his muscular frame. He recognized me instantly. His posture stiffened, hands curling into uneasy fists. I considered ignoring him, but I couldn't resist the urge to see him sweat. I turned fully, meeting his gaze. "Coffee's good here," I said, voice flat. He swallowed, eyes darting to the barista. "Yeah," he replied, forcing a nod. We stood like that, tension coiling in the space between us. I paid for my order and stepped aside to wait. He shuffled forward, clearing his throat. "Just an Americano," he told the barista, but he sounded hoarse, nerves fraying at the edges. I pretended not to notice. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, letting him feel my presence. A flurry of questions buzzed in my mind, but I stayed quiet. Let him wonder if I'd lunge at him or shout in his face. He got his coffee, turned around, and locked eyes with me again. There was a flicker of guilt, then maybe some twisted form of pity. "John," he said, voice low. "I never meant. This whole thing got out of control." My jaw clenched. I felt a pulse of pain in my ribs, a reminder of the anger that lived inside me. "You should go," I said quietly. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, he nodded and walked away. As I watched him retreat, I realized I didn't want to fight. Not now, anyway. My revenge was being carried out silently, the way a steady drip of water can erode rock over time. Door. Darkness. Another space. Weeks passed. Emily tried calling, texting, emailing. At first, I read every message. Some were tearful, some were angry, some tried to reason with me. I never responded. Eventually, the messages slowed to a trickle. But I could sense her desperation in the last few she sent. "We need to settle the financials. We need to talk about our condo. You can't stay silent forever." She was wrong. I could. A friend told me that Mark was spotted less frequently at the building. Rumor had it he requested a transfer. The relationship that had once seemed so intoxicating for both of them was now overshadowed by my silent condemnation. I could almost picture them standing together, both burdened by guilt, wondering if I'd strike back. Divorce was inevitable. I saw a lawyer, laid out the facts, tried to keep the legalities as straightforward as possible. The lawyer asked me about alimony, property division, spousal support. I nodded, half listening, my mind drifting to the final confrontation that would surely come. And come it did. One day, I opened my phone to see a message from Emily. "I'll be at the condo at 7 p.m. Please, let's finalize this. My lawyer advised me to appear cooperative, so I agreed. But deep down, I knew I had one last blow to deliver. That evening, I arrived at our condo. My condo, legally, and let myself in with the key. Emily was already there, pacing in the living room. She wore a simple black blazer, her hair pinned back, trying to project calm professionalism. But the moment she saw me, her composure wavered. She exhaled sharply. "John," she began, "we need to. This can't go on." I dropped my jacket over a chair, took a seat on the couch without speaking. She hesitated, then sank into the armchair opposite me. "Fine," she said, voice trembling. "I'll talk, and you just nod, or whatever." I had the papers revised with my lawyer's suggestions. I thought we should try mediation first. I stared at her, silent. She sighed. "Why won't you just yell at me? Hit me with it, damn it." Her voice rose suddenly. "You can't just give me nothing." My heart pounded, an almost painful thump. The memory of her betrayal flashed through my mind. I took a deep breath. "There's nothing left to say." Her eyes welled up. "That's not true." She caught herself. "Don't you want to know why? Don't you want to hear it from me?" I stood up, a sudden, sharp movement that made her flinch. My chest heaved with emotion, and I felt the old physical pain flare in my body. "Why?" I repeated, voice low. "Will it bring back that moment when I walked in on you too?" She bit her lip, tears spilling. "I never." She paused, trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you like that. But you were gone. You left me behind long before Mark showed up." I let out a short, bitter laugh. It sounded hollow in the quiet room. "I was working, trying to keep us afloat. I thought that was what you wanted." She stood, stepping closer, her eyes searching mine. "It stopped being enough, John. I needed you. Not your paycheck, not the husk of you that came home to sleep. I needed your heart, your trust, your presence. And you retreated into yourself. Trust. There it was again, that weapon. You had to find someone else for that." I said flatly. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "I did." Silence engulfed us. She waited for me to explode, to shout, or slam a door. But I kept my composure, fists clenched at my sides. "You know what hurts more than you sleeping with him?" I asked. "It's that you thought so little of what we built." Her face crumpled, and she let out a sob. "Please, John." I stepped around her, picked up the divorce papers from the coffee table. "I'll sign them," I said. "I'm done." She grabbed my arm. "What about the condo?" I shrugged her hand away. "We'll figure it out through the lawyers. Whatever the law says is fair." She clenched her jaw, desperation shining in her eyes. "So this is it. You just shut me out completely and vanish." I nodded slowly. "That's exactly it." She inhaled sharply, then screamed, "You coward." Her voice echoed off the walls, raw and feral. "You're too weak to confront this head-on." I turned to meet her gaze, my voice like ice. "Weak? I've never been stronger." The words landed with a finality that made her slump, tears falling freely. In that moment, I felt the pain in my chest subside, replaced by a strange clarity. I stepped out of her reach, letting the tension remain thick between us. Door. Darkness. Another space. The next sequence of days was a blur of legal appointments, phone calls, and signing documents. Our marriage unraveled on paper, the final nails hammered into the coffin of a decade together. I could see the exhaustion etched on Emily's face in the lawyer's office. She looked like she was operating on autopilot, doing what had to be done. I maintained my silence. No outraged outbursts, no pleas for explanation. It drove her mad. Her anger smoldered beneath every forced smile and polite nod. We parted ways at the elevator after signing the last batch of papers. She tried to say something. Her lips parted, then closed again. I walked away without a word. That night, I moved the last of my things from the condo. Danny helped. He kept throwing me concerned glances, but I shrugged them off. The physical pain in my body had quieted over the last few weeks, replaced by an odd sense of emptiness that felt almost peaceful. Maybe that was acceptance, or maybe just numbness. Hard to tell. I spent hours after midnight sitting on the edge of Danny's couch, staring at the city lights beyond the window. So many times, I'd questioned if leaving was a mistake, if fighting for her would make sense. But every time I replayed the memory of Emily with Mark, of Emily's laughter dripping with bitterness, and of that dreaded DNA test, I felt the same blow to my gut. The same sense of betrayal. She broke me. Mark broke me. But in that brokenness, I'd found a new kind of resolve. In the days leading up to the final hearing, when the judge would sign off on the divorce, Emily tried calling again. Left voicemails. She sounded drained, as if she'd run out of tears, but hadn't run out of regrets. I wish you'd talk to me. We can part on better terms. No, that wasn't the plan. My silence was the last weapon I had, sharper than any curse or punch could ever be. If trust was once a shield, and it shattered, then now I'd use its shards to wound her with the same quiet agony she inflicted on me. Finally, the day arrived. The hearing. A cold, drab courtroom with fluorescent lights that made everyone look sickly. Emily and I sat at separate tables with our respective lawyers. The judge flipped through papers, asked us a few questions. Emily answered in a shaky voice, glancing in my direction. I responded with quick, clipped replies. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Then the judge said some official words, signed a paper, and just like that, divorce granted. I heard Emily exhale sharply, saw her close her eyes. Maybe relief, maybe sorrow. I couldn't tell. For me, it was like a dam broke in my chest. A wave of finality washed over me, leaving me strangely calm. We stepped into the hallway, parted by a few feet of scuffed linoleum. She took one tentative step forward, as if to speak. Her lawyer whispered something, maybe telling her to leave me alone. She hesitated, lips trembling. Then, with a single tear rolling down her cheek, she turned away. Door. Darkness. Another space. Life after that was both simpler and harder. Simpler because the waiting ended. I no longer had to wrestle with a phantasm of my marriage every time I walked into a room. Harder because the nights felt longer, emptier. The companionship, however broken it had become, was gone. But I survived. I found that each day, the physical pain in my body eased a little. My shoulders loosened, my spine uncoiled. I started running again, early in the mornings, letting the rhythm of my feet pounding the pavement drown out my turbulent thoughts. And with each stride, I felt a trace of strength flood back into my veins, the strength of a man who has endured betrayal and come out the other side. Sometimes I passed by that building downtown, the one where Emily used to work and Mark used to stand guard. I'd glance at the uniformed men out front, wondering if Mark was in there somewhere, or if he'd finally transferred to a different location. I never went inside. One evening, months after the divorce, I found myself sitting in a small bar not far from Danny's apartment. It was an old-fashioned place, dark wooden tables, a piano in the corner, the faint smell of whiskey swirling through the air. I was nursing a drink, my thoughts drifting as they often did to everything that had happened. That's when I saw Mark again. He walked in alone, spotted me, and froze like a cornered animal. I felt a flicker of adrenaline surge in my gut, a reminder of the intense anger I once held. But then, something else took over, an odd sense of finality. He approached, looking uneasy. Mind if I sit? I shrugged. Free country. He pulled out a chair, set his drink down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The bar's low chatter and the faint piano melody drifted around us. He cleared his throat. Look, I know I'm the last person you want to see. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. I sipped my drink, letting him squirm under my silence. Eventually, he continued. I never wanted to ruin your life. He paused, fiddling with the napkin. I guess I just got caught up in something that. It just happened. I let out a short, humorless laugh. It didn't just happen. You don't trip and end up in bed with someone's wife. He grimaced, nodding. Yeah, you're right. I stared at him, remembering the moment I caught them. My blood was boiling, but not like before. It was calmer now, more controlled. She's your problem now, I said, voice quieter than I expected. He shook his head. We're not together anymore. I felt a surge of unexpected relief. Or maybe it was just curiosity. Didn't work out. He sighed. No, things got complicated. She was, I don't know. We wanted different things. After you left, she was a wreck. I guess we both realized there was no future. I swallowed, an odd pang of pity stirring within me. Right. He stared into his drink. I didn't come here to excuse what I did. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I hurt you and her, and it's not something I'm proud of. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension heavy but not explosive. I realized then that the weapon of trust had cut us all, me, Emily, and him in its own twisted way. He looked like a man weighed down by regrets. Apology accepted, I said finally. But let's not pretend that changes anything. He nodded. I get it. With that, he rose from the chair, left a few bills on the table to cover his drink, and walked out. I watched him go, feeling the surprising sense of release. It was as if a final knot untied itself in my chest. Door. Darkness. Another space. In the months that followed, I settled into a new routine. I moved out of Danny's place and rented a small apartment on the edge of the city. I threw myself into work, not out of escapism, but to rebuild, to stand on my own feet again. I started to appreciate small joys, like the quiet of a morning run, the steam rising from a cup of coffee, the breeze through an open window. Occasionally, I'd think of Emily, wonder how she was doing, if she ever read my letter over and over, or if she'd torn it up in anger, if she regretted her choices. Part of me hoped she found some peace. Another part hoped she'd carry the sting of my silence forever. It's a strange thing to discover you can live through the worst betrayal and still find life on the other side. I'd been destroyed, but in that destruction, I discovered a stronger version of myself, one who could stare heartbreak in the eye and not crumble, one who learned that trust, when abused, could be turned into a silent, devastating retribution. I carried that knowledge like a talisman in my chest. The physical pain, the deep ache I once felt, gradually faded. My body grew lighter, my mind clearer. On some nights, I even dreamt of Emily and me from long ago, drunk on each other's laughter, lost in the warmth of shared desire. I'd wake up with a dull pang in my heart, but it wasn't crippling anymore, just a reminder of what once was, and what would never be again. And so, I stand here now, telling you all this not to seek pity but to declare that I survived. I won't pretend I'm fully healed, or that the scars of her betrayal don't throb sometimes when the nights get too quiet. But I'm stronger than I was. I'm more certain of who I am, and I carry myself with a silent confidence, knowing I withheld the one thing she desperately wanted, my desperate plea for her to stay. In the end, that was my final act of vengeance. No yelling, no physical confrontation, just quiet removal, just letting her realize the hollow echo that remains when love, trust, and forgiveness are no longer extended. If she ever looks for me in the shadows, hoping I'll appear with outstretched arms, she'll find only silence. Divorce. A word that once haunted me, now a chapter written in my past. A chapter that started with passion, intimacy, and the naive belief that love could conquer any distance. It ended with betrayal, heartbreak, and the understanding that sometimes the most powerful response is to walk away, unbroken, unbowed, and forging a new path. Door. Darkness. Another space.